The early contender for the quote of the playoffs came from Jazz coach Frank Layden. The following gem appeared in the Eugene Register Guard. Asked if he thought the Jazz would have won if Adrian Dantley had not been out with back spasms, Layden said, and I quote, "How do I know? I'm not a mystic. I don't even know where I'm going to eat tomorrow, and believe me, that is a major consideration."
I always like to say that Michael got to play with me for a year at North Carolina. I think it really helped him.
Spectacular player from the beginning.
You can see right away Jordan was going to be a big-time scorer.
And showed what an impact he was going to have on the league.
This is NB86, celebrating the 30-year anniversary of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls' 1986 NBA season. And now your hosts, Adam Ryan and Aaron Steen.
Welcome back to another episode of NB86, up to episode 14 of the series, Aaron, the penultimate episode. Thanks again for being a part of the show, mate. How are you today?
Adam, imagine, if you will, a 30-episode series titled NB85. It covers every single game from Michael Jordan's rookie season. That's all 82 games plus the playoffs, game by game. NB85, check it out.
I promise I am not paying you to say this. I'm never above shameless self-promotion, so it's inallairness.com/NB85. Thanks, mate. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you are a regular listener, welcome back.
NBA, news, notes and quotes. 1986 playoffs, through to the finals.
With the regular season complete, the Bulls sent their playoff roster, I presume via a high-tech fax machine, to the NBA's offices. Recovering from a broken cheekbone, Juwan Oldham, who missed the team's final 18 regular season games, he replaced an unlucky Michael Holton, a guest of the show on episode 72. Team doctors suggested that Juwan wouldn't be able to play until Game 4 of the first round, and that was quite optimistic in the extreme, given the Bulls were 30-52 and they were matched up against the 67-15 Boston Celtics. On the 14th of April, the CBA named the Golden State Warriors' Terry Teagle, the 1986 CBA in NBA Player of the Year. Now, that was an award I had no idea existed, and I was thrilled to find it. I love that sort of minutia. Even, dare I say, minutia lovers unite. As it stood, Teagle was one of 44 CBA veterans that were in the NBA, and he played all 82 games in this 86 season. That's a feat he'd accomplished a further 4 times in the next 6 years.
There was no need for the Bulls to spare the champagne after sealing their playoff berth, wrote Bob Sakamoto. With the upcoming matchup against Boston, victory celebrations will be few and far between from here on out. Nothing could sober up the Bulls quicker than a matchup against what Celtics coach K.C. Jones called the best Boston team ever. The players were set to share in $25,000 that the team would be awarded for making the postseason, and the organisation figured to make approximately $250,000 in ticket sales for Game 3 at Chicago Stadium. According to ticketing director Joe O'Neill, making the playoffs the season before, in 1985, had doubled the Bulls' season ticket holder list for 85-86.
And that would be something that I guess would have continued to occur in the subsequent seasons as well. Hashtag NB87 and beyond.
If we have one advantage against Boston, that would be it. These were the words of centre Dave Corzine, and that one advantage they may have as a team with the worst record in the playoffs against the team with the best record, a hope that they might take the Bulls lightly.
Oh, okay. Well, that's one way to look at it.
Cavs forward Old Mother Hubbard also had some advice for the Bulls, as Cleveland was a team who faced the Celtics in the first round the previous year. Beat the hell out of them inside and fly Larry Bird out of the country.
I love that. Old Mother Hubbard is code for Phil Hubbard.
As if facing the Celtics wasn't punishment enough for Michael Jordan, he was due to be roasted at a charity function the following fall.
Oh, can you imagine Jordan listening to people roasting him? That would be uncomfortable listening and watching, surely.
Love to see that.
Also on this date, Bulls assistant coach Murray Moccasin Arnold was named the head coach of the Western Kentucky University team. And on the 17th, it was a day of blowouts as 4 games kicked off the 86 NBA playoffs. In the closest margin of victory for the day, Atlanta thumped the visitors from Detroit 140-122. Neek was nice with 28 points, and Kevin Willis had 22. Doc Rivers scored 17 points and tallied 16 assists. Lamb refused to be silenced. That's terrible. Refused to be silenced with 26 points. With 26 points and 17 rebounds. I've actually forgotten what I've typed. That's how long ago it is. That's why I'm laughing at my own jokes. Isaiah had 20 points and 16 assists. And friend of the show, Kelly Tripucka, episodes 73 and 74, notched 19 points, 6 rebounds and 6 assists. And Atlanta went 1 zip up. Boston hadn't lost a first-round series since 1954 and had only missed the playoffs 4 times since that same year.
Wow.
Now, Game 1, Chicago at Boston in front of 14,890 saw the Boston Celtics 123 defeat the Bulls 104, and Boston went up 1 zip in the series. For the Bulls, Jordan had a fantastic performance with 49 points on 18 of 36 field goals. Orlando Woolridge had 25 points, Charles Oakley 13 points and 10 boards. And for Boston, Bird had 30 points, 6 boards, 8 assists. McHale had 27 points and 10 rebounds. DJ 26 points. And Robert Parrish, 23 points and 10 rebounds. Has to be one of the forgotten gems of Jordan's career. Of course, it was usurped by his Game 2 performance, which we'll get to shortly, but this was an astonishing performance.
The accompanying article in the Tribune was headlined, Bulls Drop Opener Despite Jordan's 49. MJ's record-breaking Game 2 has always overshadowed the 49 points that he had in Game 1 of this series against the Celtics, as you just mentioned. The Sack wrote that Jordan awed the most partisan of crowds at Boston Garden and even left them applauding his 30-point first-half effort as the players walked off the court. Casey Jones knew how good Jordan was by the way his bench players were sitting back in their seats as opposed to leaning forward as they were trying to not make eye contact with him in case they got called into the game to guard MJ. Even Robert the Chief Parrish said he caught himself just watching Jordan and Orlando, who had 25 high-flying points of his own. Jordan added it was the first time this season that he had played a full game and said he felt like he could have scored every time, though that probably wouldn't happen in Game 2.
If only he knew. I don't even think he realised or could realise the potential he would unleash in Game 2, which was just a game for the ages.
Jordan burned Rick Carlisle, Danny Ainge and Dennis Johnson in the first half before DJ returned the favour in the second half with 16 third-quarter points as Jordan repeatedly left him open. The Bulls only trailed by 2, 61-59 at the half on the back of a 61% shooting clip in the first 2 quarters. After 3, the Celtics had shot an amazing 30 free throws to the Bulls' 11, much to the disgust of Stanley Allbeck, who blasted the officials post-game. Not even what may have been the Bulls' finest 24 minutes of play in the first half was enough to trouble the Celtics in this game. The following day, Bernie Lincecum also wrote a scathing piece on the one-man band of the Bulls versus the team-oriented Celtics, making the playoffs apparently didn't feel like much of a consolation prize to Bernie, and he actually said that they were about to embarrass themselves on the Boston Garden floor.
Wow, pulling no punches.
No. And Adam, could you imagine how amazing it would have been to actually have seen a game at Boston Garden?
I wish I really... hang on. Yeah. Regular listeners of the show, mate, will probably know that I'm just baiting you for a scathing reply of your own there. But January of 1994, attended Boston Garden, saw the Golden State Warriors take on the Boston Celtics. Pretty good game, actually. And it was awesome to be up into the rafters, even though it was about 410 degrees, watching the Celtics take on Golden State. Post Larry Bird, of course, post Kevin McHale, but the Chief was still playing.
Yeah, I actually love those two 94 and 95 Celtics teams. 95, of course, because Dominique played with him and I'm a big Dominique fan, but I love that 94 team with, you know, the other likes of Kevin Gamble and Alaa Abdelnaby.
One of the great names of all time. I even said it to him on a Twitter comment once, and I think he actually retweeted it, so he must have been pretty happy with it. Alaa Abdelnaby. Not too many better syllables that can flow off the tongue there. Sacramento visited Houston and were pummeled 107-87 in their series opener. Hakeem Olajuwon's 29 points and 15 boards led the Rockets, whilst Ralph Sampson added 16 points and 13 rebounds in just 29 minutes of play. For the Kings, only 3 guys scored in double figures. Rush Street Reggie Theus, who had 18, Mike Woodson, 16, and Lascelles Thompson, 11. Thompson also grabbed 17 rebounds, it should be noted, and Houston went up 1-0 in the series. LA Lakers were looking to become the first NBA team to repeat as champs since 1969, and that was the Boston Celtics. San Antonio coach Cotton Fitzsimmons said it best, "I hope the commissioner doesn't cancel the next game because of this," following the Spurs' 47-point loss, 135-88, to open the series against the defending NBA champion LA Lakers.
I hope the commissioner doesn't cancel the next game. That's one of the great lines of NB86.
Isn't it hilarious? Yeah, at least he had a good sense of humour, Cotton. Byron Scott had 24 points for the Lakers and Magic dished out 18 assists. Mike Mitchell's 24 points led San Antonio, and Wes Matthews dropped 16 points and 10 assists as the Lakers went up 1-0. On the 18th, with 3.5 minutes to play, Philadelphia were cruising 94-77 in their playoff opener versus Washington. The Bullets proceeded to reel off an incredible 15 consecutive points. Still, the 76ers were ahead 94-92 with 3 seconds remaining and Dr. J at the line. In a twist of fate, episode 13 featured his late-game heroics against Boston. Julius missed 3 straight free throws. He was awarded the 3rd following a lane violation. The door remained slightly ajar. The Bullets had one chance to steal a most improbable victory.
Brownfield will inbound from mid-court. He's got Robinson, McMillan, good outside shooters, Malone a good outside shooter, and Dudley Bradley out there, who the Sixers will most likely not pay a lot of attention to. The crowd on its feet. Here's the play. Dudley Bradley has the ball launched. Good. And it counts. Oh, my heavens. The most unlikely guy in all of basketball to shoot that shot fires it and banks it in as the clock expired.
As per the Deseret News' article, hero Dudley Bradley was, quote, statistically the worst shooter, 34.9%, in the NBA, end quote. His 25-foot bank shot sealed the incredible 95-94 win for the visitors from Washington. Ex-Bulls coach, now head man of the Bullets, Kevin Lockery, said, quote, "If you've been around pro basketball as long as I have, you've seen everything. Steals, freak shots, missed free throws by great players. It's crazy," end quote. Jeff Malone led the Bullets with 21 points, whilst Barkley was a man possessed, notching 26 points, 22 rebounds, 9 assists and 4 steals as the Bullets took a 1-0 lead in the series.
It only seems fitting that after Julius missed 3 straight free throws, the third of which was after a lane violation, so he was gifted a third one, and for him to miss all 3, it only seems right that Dudley Bradley would hit a 25-foot bank shot and win the game for the Bullets.
That play famously features on NBA's Awesome Endings. Now, future Bull Craig Hodges dropped 25 points and dished out 7 assists, steering Milwaukee to a 119-107 win over the visiting New Jersey Nets. Hodges was on fire, hitting 10 of 11 from the field. Paul Pressey and Alton Lister were also great, each recording double-doubles, points and assists, and points and rebounds, respectively. Buck Williams had 27 points and 14 rebounds, whilst Otis Birdsong scored 24 points and handed out 7 assists as the Bucks went up 1-0. At home, Dallas held on for a 101-93 victory to open their series against Utah. The Jazz didn't score in the game's final 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Rolando Blackman, friend of the show, episode 70, had 25 points, and long-armed Sam Perkins, 10 points and 15 boards for the Mavs. Utah scoring machine Adrian Dantley missed the game with back spasms. Karl Malone delivered a great effort. He had 23 points and 13 rebounds. The early contender for the quote of the playoffs came from Jazz coach Frank Layden. The following gem appeared in the Eugene Register Guard. Asked if he thought the Jazz would have won if Adrian Dantley had not been out with back spasms, Layden said, and I quote, "How do I know? I'm not a mystic. I don't even know where I'm going to eat tomorrow, and believe me, that is a major consideration." End quote. Frank Layden at his absolute best there, and Dallas had the 1-0 lead in the series. The Nuggets had a 133-126 victory over the visitors from Portland. Calvin was Natt mucking around, dropping a stone-cold career-high 40 points, along with 10 rebounds, on the Blazers. Alex English had 30 points, and Danny Shays had 22 points and 11 rebounds. Portland's leading scorers were Kiki Vandeweghe with 28, Michael Thompson 24 and Clyde Drexler had 20 as the Nuggets took a 1-0 series lead.
Hello to Stone Cold Steve Austin, if you're listening.
The rattlesnake.
Just a little side note, it is raining cats and dogs here at the moment. I don't know if you can hear it through the microphone. Hopefully you can't. It's absolutely hammering down.
Okay.
Anyway, I just heard thunder, so stay tuned. On April 19, Bob Sakamoto wrote that the accolades continue to roll in for MJ's Game 1 performance. It was revealed that he was also battling a 24-hour virus that gave him an upset stomach, making the 49 points that little more impressive. Jordan's 49 broke the Bulls' playoff scoring record of 41. Win Robertson set back in 1968 against the Lakers, and CBS could not wait to show Jordan off to a national audience in game number 2. Dennis Johnson mentioned a report saying that Jordan could have been a great athlete at any sport he chose, by adding that he wished he had have chosen some other sport to play. The Sack said there's a danger that the Bulls might just hand Jordan the ball in game 2 and stand and watch his handiwork. Little did Bob know.
Oh, he's on the money there. On the 19th, in leading his Hawks to a 137-125 home win, Dominic Wilkins scorched the Pistons for 50 points in a game that featured some incredible stat lines. His playoff high 50 points tied a playoff franchise record set by Bob Pettit in 1958 when the franchise was in St. Louis. Neek would play 56 postseason games, and his last playoff game, just think about that for a moment, the 1999 lockout-shortened season as a member of the Orlando Magic. 2 points in 3 minutes at Philadelphia. Moving on. This was a career night for Atlanta's Randy Wittman, who had 35 points, and not to be outdone, Spud Webb had a career-high 18 assists in this game. For Detroit, Isaiah had 36 points and 9 assists, and the Hawks took a 2-0 lead over Detroit. Robert Reed's 29 points led Houston to a 111-103 win over visiting Sacramento. Larry drew up 20 points for the Kings, and Houston took a 2-0 lead in the series. In Los Angeles, the Lakers walloped the Spurs 122-94, highlighted by Magic Johnson's 30-point and 13-assist night. The Spurs were paced by former Bull, Wes Matthews, who went for a career-high 30 points, a feat he'd reproduce 4 days hence, and the Lakers went up 2-0.
I think that if the San Antonio Spurs are being propelled to these enormous losses by the play of Wesley Matthews, you could tell that they were in a bit of strife in this series, wouldn't you say?
I'd just like to watch that bus reverse back over Wes, and there it goes.
Yet another stunning article by Bernie Lincecum on April 20 titled Allbeck's Needle Sharpens Reality. In the article, the cruise ship captain goes on to point out to the Boston media they only ever write about the Celtics making the extra pass. When the ball goes into McHale and Bird in the post, it never comes out. When MJ does the same thing, all they ever say is it's one-on-one basketball. He also said that he doesn't even want to talk about DJ shutting down MJ when MJ dropped 30 in the first half of Game 1 and DJ went 0 for 6, that the Celtics aren't a good individual team, not Bird or McHale, not compared to Jordan and Woolridge.
Wow, he's teeing off.
That the Boston Celtics play great team defense that's actually illegal. Larry Bird isn't a great passer. It was at this point that the Boston media left Allbeck, impishly pleased with himself, standing alone at midcourt. Allbeck went on to say that he hated the Boston media, which is why he chose to say those things.
That's sensational. The cruise ship captain was commandeering the Love Boat throughout that media session, it's fair to say.
I think if he had the choice, he would have steered the Love Boat right through the middle of the Boston media.
He would have. They would have gone down screaming Leonardo and Kate style. No idea what that even means. That could be taken many ways. Heading into Game 2 at Boston, I read a great quote from MJ that appeared in the Wilmington Morning Star. Quote, I got those fresh young legs. While everybody was playing, I had a 19 or 20 week vacation. I want to win badly, very badly. My season is wrapped up in these playoffs. So that's ominous as Game 2 approached. And Game 2 at Boston in front of, again, a sellout crowd of 14,890. Saw an absolute epic. Boston defeated the Bulls 135-131 in double overtime, and Boston took a commanding 2-0 series lead. For Chicago, Jordan had 63 points on 22 of 41 from the field. Very, very good. 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. Orlando Woolridge had 24 points and 9 rebounds. Charles Oakley, 10 points and 14 rebounds. And for Boston, overlooked in this incredible Jordan performance, Larry Bird just dropped a casual 36 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. Kevin McHale, 27 points and 15 boards. Danny Ainge, 24 points, and Bill Walton, in just 25 minutes, had 10 points and 15 rebounds. Jordan set a single-game playoff record with 63 points, eclipsing the Lakers' Elgin Baylor and his 61-point masterpiece in Game 5 of the 1962 Finals, also at Boston, just over 21 years prior. Check out episode 44 of the podcast, where I chat with a great mate of ours, Todd Spear, and we break down this actual game. So it's a great compendium piece to what we've just discussed now.
I'm about to drop a rare quote that no one has ever heard before. 3-time NBA MVP Larry Bird. Are you ready?
You got me on tenterhooks, is that even the saying? But anyhow, I'm looking forward to hearing it. And there's also another great quote that I'm going to read out to you from the legend later on in this episode.
I think he's God disguised as Michael Jordan.
Anticlimactic. I was actually expecting some absolute nugget of gold, not to be.
He's the most awesome player in the NBA. He put on one of the greatest shows of all time. Big praise from the reigning 2-time NBA MVP, Larry Bird, who sat for 45 minutes after the game praising Jordan's effort. He also added his admiration for his want to come back and play after his foot injury, stating that there was no question Bulls management wanted to be in the lottery. Jordan's 49 and 63 points were the greatest output ever against the Celtics in back-to-back games. Bob Sakamoto said that with 49 in Game 1 and 63 in Game 2, he's on track for 77 in Game 3.
Caught me by surprise.
Larry Bird's response was that he will retire if Jordan gets 77 in Game 3.
Oh, that's fantastic. This is why I'm glad I don't look through your notes, because that spoils, obviously, my mostly over-the-top reactions.
Aside from all of Jordan's brilliance, he actually missed 2 late free throws in regulation and a 15-footer in the first overtime period that would have sealed the win for Chicago. Other highlights for the Bulls were that they only turned the ball over once in the first half and limited the Celtics to just 48% shooting for the entire game. He got how many? Let me see that stat sheet. That's a mistake. Orlando Woolridge then snatched the sheet from Charles Oakley. My God, that's incredible. 4 words to describe Jordan: incredible, amazing, unbelievable, and astounding were like 4 cups of tea from the same bag, all far too weak, said Bernie Lincecum. Casey Jones used the word awesome, to which Bernie replied, nice try, coach. Now call Baryshnikov limber, Pavarotti loud, and Woody Allen smart.
Oh my goodness, I can sense Bernie Lincecum actually is unearthing himself as a star of the series. He's certainly coming to the fore.
Coach Albeck took umbrage to Kevin McHale's antics at the end of regulation as he fired up the Boston crowd to make noise and distract Jordan as he made his game-tying foul shots. McHale said that they were free throws that he never should have been taking, in reference to his opinion on the foul that was called on him, which sent Jordan to the line.
If you were so inclined to visit YouTube and type in Michael Jordan 63 points radio, one of the results, if not the first result, will be Jordan's 63-point performance against Boston and a unique Bulls radio broadcast led by the great Jim Durham and Johnny Red Kerr, both gentlemen rest in peace. And it's a fantastic listen to the footage we've seen countless times, a radio broadcast that had previously all but never been heard outside the Chicago area.
One word that I could use to describe it, a word that's literally just come to me now all by myself, using my own creativity here, entrancing.
It is. It's absolutely awesome. On the 20th of April, Philadelphia evened its series with Washington in a 102-97 home win. Charles had another stellar performance with 27 points, 20 rebounds and 6 assists. Jeff Malone led the Bullets with 25 points as the series tied at 1 apiece. Milwaukee were comfortable winners 111-97 over New Jersey in Game 2 of their series. The Nets' Mike Jaminski was great with 28 points and 13 rebounds. Friend of the show, Terry Cummings, episode 17, led the Bucks with 28 points as they went up 2-zip. At home, Dallas secured a 113-106 win over the Utah Jazz. Mark Aguirre had 27 points for the victors. The Jazz's Adrian Dantley, still struggling with back-related issues, missed yet another game. Karl Malone was emerging as a star with 31 points and 8 rebounds. Friend of the show, there's a lot of friends, let's be honest. Mark Eaton, episode 49, had 12 points, 11 rebounds and 7 blocks. Dallas were up 2-0. Portland secured a clutch win at Denver, 108-106 to even its series. The Blazers' Kiki Vandeweghe was phenomenal with 36 points. Alex English had 24 points and 10 rebounds for the Nuggets, and they tied the series up at 1 game apiece. On 21st of April, there were no games, so let's get straight to the 22nd, mate.
Bob Sakamoto outlined what the Bulls needed to do to keep their off-season from being turned on. The Celtics had pounded Chicago on the boards, showing Chicago's need to improve there. They desperately needed more production from forward Sid Green, and last but not least, more Michael Jordan.
The NBA's all-rookie team was announced on this date, the 22nd. Seattle's Xavier McDaniel was the only unanimous choice. He joined New York's Patrick Ewing, Utah's Karl Malone, Detroit's Joe Dumars, and Chicago's Charles Oakley. Boston at Chicago in front of 18,968, which is well above what I remember the capacity being listed as in Bulls games. Saw Boston defeat the Bulls 122-104 and sweep the series 3-0. It was a near replica of the Game 1 scoreline. The hometown Bulls fans were not enough. For Boston, Kevin McHale led the Celtics with 31 points. Danny Ainge had 20 and Larry Bird had 19. Dennis Johnson, Parrish and Walton all had double figures. For the Bulls, the top scorer was John Paxson, who had 23 points on 6 of 10 from the field. Good effort there from Johnny Pax. He had 11 of 15 from the free throw line. Wow. Dave Corzine, the great man, had 22 points and 15 rebounds, if you don't mind. And that was only in 34 minutes of play. So good stuff there from Dave. And Michael Jordan had 19 points, 10 rebounds and 9 assists. So just 1 assist shy of a trip dip, dare I say. The Celtics rounded out the series 3-0.
Bernie Lincecum wrote, "Let's get right to the highlights. The greatest moment of the night," said Stanley Allbeck, "was the national anthem." Michael Jordan fouled out of the game with 5:24 remaining and then fought back tears as the packed house at Chicago Stadium gave him a 2-minute ovation to show their appreciation. After 49 and 63 in the first 2 games, Boston's Larry Bird said that they were not going to worry about the other Bulls in this game, as MJ often saw a double team not long after passing half court. The recent documentary on this 1986 Celtics team pointed out that they usually didn't have to change anything in their game plan to overcome the other team. So for them to have to do this showed the impression that Jordan had left on them. That said, forward Kevin McAngel only packed enough clothes for a one-day stay in Chicago, and the Celtics peeled off 15 unanswered points to start the third and give them a 87-61 lead. Allbeck ran the gauntlet with Jordan picking up his third personal foul early in the second term, leaving him in the game before begrudgingly taking him out when he picked up his fourth with 4:21 to go in the first half. Allbeck may have also been unwilling to pull Jordan from the game as the Iceman was unavailable with a stomach flu. Jordan's 131 points broke Will Chamberlain's 3-game series playoff scoring record of 116 points.
The Iceman goeth.
Yeah. Not the greatest exit from Chicago for the Iceman.
No, it's an unfortunate way to go out because I believe he played every regular season game and the first 2 games in this series, if I'm not mistaken. I'll edit that out if it's wrong. All right. So on April 22, Detroit avoided elimination 106-97, returning to the confines of home. Friend of the show, Kelly Tripucka, sprung for 33 points, and it was the second highest playoff output of his career. He scored 40 points at New York in Game 3 of that classic 84 playoff series between the Pistons and the Knicks, and we talked all about that in the episode with Kelly. Shameless self-promotion off the charts there. Dominique had 21 points. Atlanta held on to a 2-1 lead. Down 18 at the half, a furious finish saw Milwaukee enjoy a 118-113 comeback win, spoiling host New Jersey's attempt to stretch the series to a fourth game. I thought that was a typo for a minute, then I realised I was being a bighead. The Bucks had great contributions all round, particularly from Terry Cummings, Paul Pressey and Alton Lister. New Jersey were led by Otis Birdsong, Buck Williams and Mike Jaminski, and they had a clean sweep 3-0. Down 13, the 76ers stormed back to win at Washington, regaining home court, 91-86. Julius had 22 points for Philadelphia. The Bullets' Gus Williams was a lone hand in the scoring column with 28, and Philadelphia moved to a 2-1 series lead. At Portland, rookie Blair Rasmussen had 26 points and 9 rebounds as Denver won 115-104. Kiki had 24 points for the Blazers, and Kenny Carr was excellent with 18 points and 15 rebounds. Denver had a 2-1 series lead. Houston at Sacramento had a 113-98 win. That wrapped up a 3-0 sweep of the Kings. The Rockets were led by Lewis Lloyd and Ralph Sampson, each scoring 25 points. Friend of the show, Eddie Johnson, episode 41, had 33 points and 8 rebounds for the Kings as Houston took the 3-0 series win. On the 23rd of April, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's 25 points guided his LA Lakers to a series sweep of San Antonio, 114-94. Magic Johnson had 17 assists, and for the Spurs, Wes Matthews again lit it up in the scoring column with 30 points. Artis Gilmore had 17 points and 11 rebounds. Lakers won 3-0. Utah, at home, held on for a 100-98 decision and extended their series versus Dallas to a fourth game. For the Jazz, Ricky Green had a playoff career-high 32 points to go along with 8 assists. James Donaldson was on a mission for the Mavs with 20 rebounds. 6 players scored double figures for Dallas, led by the aforementioned Donaldson with 17 points, and Dallas had a 2-1 series lead.
April 24th began the reporting of the Chicago Bulls off-season, I guess you could say, after the elimination from the playoffs by the Boston Celtics. And with a return to respectability, Michael Jordan had shown what he could do for the Chicago Bulls. It was now time for the Bulls to show what they could do for Michael Jordan, wrote Bob Sakamoto. Jerry Krause said that unless a 21-year-old Bill Russell returns, Michael Jordan is as close to untouchable as you can get, and rookie Charles Oakley wasn't far behind him.
That's classic.
Not literally, but in his anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
I'll interject here for a minute. There's some great stuff that happens throughout the Bulls off-season that you're mostly going to be reporting about, mate, as we get through the rest of this episode.
Yeah. The trade rumours had started to flow with talk of Macy and Woolridge being made available to Indiana for Swinger Stepanovic and Vern Fleming.
Steve Stepanovic, love it.
With a need for a starting centre, the Bulls could possibly trade for Stepanovic or trade for Artis Gilmore, who had told the Bulls players that he wanted to return to Chicago. Choosing 9th in the upcoming draft meant the Bulls would most likely miss on the top centre prospects in Chris Washburn and Bradley Lee Doherty. The development of Mike Brown in Atlantis.com/62 was a key for Chicago. Krause made the comment that Brown had no neck and could play. Instead of the Twin Towers, the twin refrigerators in Brown and Oakley at the same time.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Jerry Krause saying that Mike Brown had no neck.
He had no neck.
Goodness me. The NBA announced its 1986 All-Defensive Team as selected by the league's head coaches on this date, the 24th. Milwaukee's Squid Moncrief, hat tip Aaron Steen, received the most votes and was joined on the squad by teammate Paul Pressey, Boston's Kevin McHale, Utah's Mark Eaton, and Philadelphia's Maurice Cheeks. It was a 4th straight appearance on the team for Sid and Mo, and Pressey and Eaton made the team for a 2nd time. Whoop, 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 whoop. Larry and Curly, is that the only other 2 we haven't mentioned? Yeah. Oh, dear. I think the only stooges are us 2, mate. But anyhow, moving on. 14 fourth-quarter points from Jeff Malone helped his Bullets send their series against the 76ers to a 5th and deciding game. This after a 116-111 home win versus Philadelphia. Malone had 32 points in total. Cliff Robinson had an impressive 31 points, and Jeff Ruland, another friend of the show, episode 45, playing in his first game since arthroscopic knee surgery on April the 1st, added 13 points, including a clutch layup and free throw in the game's closing stages. For Philly, Mo Cheeks led with 30 points. The Doctor had 25 points and Barkley went for 22 points, 15 rebounds and 7 assists. Denver defeated hometown Portland 116-112 to extinguish the Blazers' season. The Nuggets' fat lever had a playoff career-high 30 points, which he'd equal in 1988 versus Dallas, and Calvin Natt added 22 points. Kiki Vandeweghe and Michael Thompson had 24 and 23 points respectively for Portland. It's also worth noting that Denver acquired Lafayette Lever and Calvin Natt from the Blazers in a deal that sent Kiki Vandeweghe to Portland in June of 1984. Denver won the series 3-1.
On April 25th, the odds and ends in the Tribune pointed out Pat O'Brien's flub in asking MJ pre-Game 2 if they could beat the Lakers when they were actually playing the Celtics. Now, apparently his performance during the entire game got him a bit of a kick in the pants from CBS's executive producer of the NBA, Ted Shaker.
Apparently Shaker was a mover too. Now, speaking of Pat O'Brien, mate, the reason I was giggling away while you were saying that, I was recently involved in a rather unfortunate Twitter stoush with Pat O'Brien. Eventually, I calmed things down a bit, but I think he took offence to a comment where I actually shared footage of that moment. And all I wanted to say was, my goal, I should say, was just to let people know that Jordan was loose heading into Game 2 where he got those 63 points because he laughed and corrected Pat about that flub that you just mentioned. Pat actually took offence to it inadvertently. And, he said something like, send me your interviews with Jordan and we'll compare notes. Something like that.
And then it was on for Danny Young and Joanne Oldham.
Nice. I really like that. That was awkward. But I think I got Pat back on side and hopefully he actually has agreed to appear on a future episode of the show. That will be remain to be seen, I suppose. We'll see how that goes. Moses Malone was officially ruled out for the rest of the playoffs following a visit from ophthalmologist Dr. Jack Jeffers. Even though the 76ers' chances of progressing deep into the postseason revolved around Moses, the fractured orbit of his right eye hadn't healed well enough for him to play.
This fracture, I'm assuming, was what led to him wearing goggles.
It must have been the key contributor, yeah. Atlanta ousted Detroit in a 2-overtime classic at the Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. The Hawks wrapped up their series 3-1. Have a listen to these Hawks stat lines. The human highlight film had 38 points and 8 rebounds. Randy Wittman had 29 points, and Doc Rivers had a near triple-double, 14 points, 13 rebounds, and 9 assists. The star of the second overtime was Spud Webb. He hit 2 free throws with 3 seconds left to secure Atlanta's stirring series victory. Isaiah Thomas starred for the Pistons with 30 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. Lambier added 27 points and 13 rebounds. Kelly Tripucka had 24 points and 8 rebounds. And a young Joe Dumars recorded 18 points and 11 assists as the Hawks took the series 3-1. Dallas disposed of Utah 117-113, closing out their first-round series in Utah. For the Mavericks, Perkins had 29 points, Aguirre 28, Brad Davis 26, and another friend of the show, Ro Blackman 20. For Davis, this was his playoff career high, and it was the equal third highest scoring game of his career. His all-time high was 32 points at Chicago in the 82 season. For the Jazz, Big T, Thurl Bailey, led the team with 24 points. Future Bull Bobby Hansen contributed 22 points. And Mark Eaton had an absolute blinder, 20 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists and 4 blocks. John Stockton played just 17 minutes and he had 11 points and 5 assists. And for those wondering, Karl Malone in 29 minutes had 17 points. Dallas were 3-1 series winners. Heaps of info going on here, mate. On the 26th, with one game remaining before the first round of the playoffs were complete, Round 2 commenced on this date as Houston hosted Denver. But before we get to that, let's put a bow on Round 1 on the 27th. Washington pushed Philadelphia to a deciding 5th game, so that was a really good series. The 76ers jumped out to a 40-22 lead after one quarter, leaving the gun-shy Bullets little to no shot at victory. Philly outscored Washington 37-24 in the 4th before winning 134-109, advancing to Round 2. The 76ers' Terry Catledge dropped 27 points and Mo Cheeks added 24 with 11 assists. Cliff Robinson starred for Washington with 30 points and 11 rebounds, and Dan Roundfield added 16 points and 16 boards. This was the only first-round series that went the distance. There were 4 sweeps. Now, as I alluded to a moment ago, Round 2 commenced on April 26th. The number 2 seeded Houston met number 3 seeded Denver. The Rockets prevailed in 6 games, 4 of which were decided by less than 7 points, so that was pretty close. The series was tied at 2 games apiece with the crucial Game 5 at Houston. The Rockets thumped Denver by 28 in that game, closing out the series in Game 6. The Twin Towers of Ralph Sampson and Hakeem Olajuwon combined for 53.5 points, 26 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 4 steals and 5.7 blocks throughout the series. Nuggets Hall of Famer Alex English averaged 29.2 points over the 6 games, and the next highest scorer was Calvin Natt with 14.5 points per game. Moving back to April 27, 2 more second-round contests commenced. Number 1 seeded Boston disposed of Atlanta in a 5-game clinic. Only Game 3 was decided by single digits. To Atlanta's credit, they staved off elimination in Game 4 behind a Superman-esque performance from the Human highlight film. Neek chalked up 37 points, 9 rebounds and 5 assists as the Hawks gave Boston its first postseason loss. That loss likely awakened the sleeping giant as the Celtics demolished Atlanta 132-99 to wrap up the series at the Garden 2 days hence. The Slaughterhouse 5 of Bird, McHale, Parrish, Ainge and Johnson were great. Larry and Kevin averaged 27.2 and 24.4 points respectively, whilst the other 3 averaged between 14.4 and 14.8 points per game.
Game 5 included the perfect quarter that we hear so much about.
It did. Yeah, you're spot on, mate. I've just gone to basketballreference.com, the source of about 99.76% of the stats I'm using in this entire series. And Boston had a 36-6 third quarter. So you've absolutely nailed that. Congratulations. That was on May the 6th of 86. The other series that kicked off on April 27 saw the number 1 seeded LA Lakers take on the number 4 seeded Dallas. The Mavs gave the Lakers a real scare in this 6-game series. The first and last contest aside, Games 2 through 5 were decided by 11 points. Kareem, Magic and Worthy averaged 20-plus points a game. Dallas had 6 players averaging double figures, with Mark Aguirre's 27.2 and Rolando Blackman's 20.8 points, leading the way for the up-and-coming Mavericks. On the 28th, citing that the Spurs need, quote, a new situation, a new coach, a new start, end quote, San Antonio fired Cotton Fitzsimmons, and we'll reacquaint ourselves with Cotton as a head coach in NB89. There you go. On the 29th of April, the last of the conference semi-finals kicked off. Number 2 seeded Milwaukee matched up against number 3 seeded Philadelphia. Like round 1 of the playoffs, only one conference finals series went to a deciding do-or-die game. The Bucks and Sixers battled for 7 games. At Milwaukee, down by 1 point, with just a few seconds remaining, Julius Erving had the series in his hands. His 15-footer was just a little long, and time ran out. The Bucks prevailed by the narrowest of margins, 113-112. Moving on, mate, we're into May as we start to get into the business end of the postseason.
Some more Bulls off-season news. The one likely to suit up for the Bulls again, Quinton Daly wanted to make the most of his last chance by training to become a drug rehab counsellor.
Wow.
The Chicago Bulls held options on 2 one-year deals for Daly, but were not expected to exercise them. A new start away from Chicago was the best course of action in the opinion of his agent, Eloise Saperstein.
Super surname, that one. On the 2nd of May, Mike Fratello, yet another friend of the show, episode 32, was named NBA Coach of the Year at just 38 years of age. He led Atlanta to a 50-win season, and his Hawks had the greatest improvement of any team in the 1986 NBA season, after 34 wins in 1985.
He won NBA Coach of the Year award at the age of 38, and I'm also 38, and I'm sitting here recording this with you.
We go from one level to a slightly lower level.
Yikes.
What was I doing at 38? Yeah, not much. Obviously memorable. Okay. The Tsar received 60 votes from the 78-member panel, consisting of 3 media members from each league city and 9 representatives of the national media.
On May 10th, on a day that Stan Albeck met with the Jerrys, Reinsdorf and Krause, for 3.5 hours to discuss his future, the name of a possible successor popped up, Boston Celtics assistant Jimmy Rogers. Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf said that he and Jerry Krause wouldn't be talking about the future of Albeck, that it was irresponsible of people to report his impending firing from his position, and that he was going away the following week, Jerry Reinsdorf, not Stan Albeck, and nothing would be decided upon over the next 10 days. Then the very next day, it was reported that he was going to make the decision over the next 10 days. Allbeck's 3-year deal had the first 2 guaranteed, and if he was fired, the Bulls would be on the hook for $250,000 for the second guaranteed year. Jimmy Rogers, who was apparently a favourite of Jerry Reinsdorf, was actually approached by the Bulls the previous season, but Chicago was told that they couldn't speak to him until after the Celtics playoff run. The Bulls had wanted to hire a head coach for the draft lottery, which took place before the end of the season, so instead they hired Stan Allbeck. Having Krause in place to handle the draft may have changed the thinking of Reinsdorf in 1986. Rogers was the head of draft operations for the Celtics, which would have been invaluable for Chicago. He was also being linked to the head coaching role with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who he spent 7 years with as an assistant.
Some interesting bits of information there, mate. The NBA's conference finals commenced on this date, and that's the 10th of May. Number 1 seed, the LA Lakers, matched up against number 2 seeded Houston. Now, this series is arguably one of the biggest upsets in NBA history, and it was punctuated by a shot for the ages from perhaps the most unlikely player imaginable on the Houston roster. For context, the Lakers finished the regular season 62-20. They had made 5 of the previous 6 NBA finals, and they'd won 3 of those, and were the defending NBA champs. Now, for Houston, they went 51-31. It was the first 50-win team in franchise history. They'd made the NBA finals in 1981, following a 40-42 season, and had a major first-round upset of the, you guessed it, LA Lakers, 2-1 in just a 3-game series. Now, that Rockets team was led by Moses Malone and Calvin Murphy. But back to the matters at hand, the 86 conference finals. Houston stole home court advantage with a 112-102 win at the Forum. Returning home, the Rockets fired up and won games 3 and 4, leading to a remarkable Game 5 that ultimately left the Lakers lamenting. That's alliteration central there. With approximately 5 minutes left in the game, an all-in brawl erupted. The Lakers' Mitch Kupchak and the Rockets' Hakeem Olajuwon were involved in extracurricular activity off the ball before all hell broke loose. Referee Jess Kersey grabbed Hakeem, then Maurice Lucas came off the Lakers' bench, put a chokehold on the Dream, and dragged him to the ground. For a brief moment, it looked like the fracas was about to settle. However, the Rockets' bench emptied, and they joined the fray with more pushing and shoving. Even Big Game James was getting into it with friend of the show, Craig Elo. Episode 16. Crazy scenes indeed. Double technical fouls were called on Kupchak and Dream. Both were ejected and had police escorts from the court. Scores were tied at 112. There was still 1 second left, and the rest is history.
There's Ralph Sampson, who has 27. Olajuwon was ejected with 30 points scored. McRae will inbound. 1 second on the clock. Sampson. It goes! It's over! A miraculous shot by Ralph Sampson. Off balance has given the Houston Rockets the Western Conference Championship and a trip to Boston for the NBA World title. And an improbable finish to the Lakers' reign.
Michael Cooper's post-shot reaction summed up the moment, the series, and the disbelief. Houston had advanced to the NBA Finals with a convincing 4-1 win. The Lakers were the 17th consecutive team, unable to repeat as NBA champion. Boston was awaiting the Rockets after the Celtics dismantled the Bucks in possibly the quickest 4-game sweep in playoff history. The series started on May the 13th in Boston, and it wrapped up on May the 18th. So how's that? 4 Boston wins in just 6 days. Milwaukee was blown out by 32 points in Game 1, 11 points in Game 2, and returning to Wisconsin, Boston continued its winning ways, eking out a 111-107 win in Game 3, and wrapped up the series with a 111-98 win in Game 4. Even though Milwaukee had 6 players averaging double figures per game, the Celtics were just too good across the board and led in no small part by the Big Three.
On May 15, it was reported that Stan Allbeck returned to Chicago to await word from Bulls management on his future with the team. Stanley said he had heard that CBS commentator Doug Collins was a candidate for the role if he was fired. Of course, then Jerry Krause completely denied offering Collins the job, though the two had recently had dinner. According to sources, Collins had been offered the assistant coach role recently made vacant by Moccasin Arnold and had said no. though being offered the head coaching job would likely lure the former 76er into a move to Chicago to coach the Bulls. Olbeck also believed that Reinsdorf favourite and Celtics assistant Jimmy Rogers was actually being groomed to replace KC Jones down the track, meaning a departure from Boston was unlikely. Apparently, the way the Olbeck situation was being handled was raising eyebrows around the NBA, and Krause's position with the Bulls was being questioned by some Bulls investors.
Wow.
One of the investors was asked about this, and he or she said, and I quote, "He is absolutely the wrong person for the job. A bad person in a very bad job. He doesn't belong in the job. Jerry Reinsdorf is defensive about him. Some owners are upset. Some are passive. We can't do anything about it. We're powerless. Why did we let ourselves get into this position? Because we're all stupid." End quote.
It's just an unnamed source, was it?
Yeah, it was an unnamed source, one of the other Bulls investors. He or she continued on with, "The fact is, Reinsdorf is thrilled with the job Krause has done, and the simple fact of the Bulls' 30-52 record is the reason most likely that he wants to replace Olbeck."
Incredible stuff happening there, mate. Boston's Bill Walton was named the NBA's Sixth Man of the Year. Now we're talking about the 15th of May here. He said, quote, "On a scale of 1 to 10, being with the Celtics is a 25, end quote. He played a career-high 80 games and received 32 first-place votes. It's also worth noting that future recipients of the award and previous guests / friends of the show, Milwaukee's Ricky Pierce, a 2-time winner, episode 28, and Sacramento's Eddie Johnson, episode 41, finished 2nd and 3rd respectively.
In other Bulls off-season news, Michael Jordan was due to appear on The Late Show with David Letterman the following Monday.
I'll include a link to that in the show notes to this episode, which can be found at inallandness.com/NB86-14. Now, that would be the interview where he wears that all-red outfit and has the Air Jordans that Letterman starts talking about. Is that correct?
That would be the one, I'm assuming, yes.
On the 16th of May, the LA Clippers' Marcus Johnson was named the NBA's Comeback Player of the Year. He averaged 20.3 points per game, and he made the 86 Western Conference All-Star team as a guard after having previously been voted a 4-time All-Star as a forward. So that's a great little tidbit there about Marcus Johnson.
I recently listened to the Vertical podcast with Adrian Wojnarowski. He interviewed Marcus Johnson, and Marcus spoke about his playing career and his acting career as well. It was a really good listen.
He's a much underrated pro, great player in the 80s, and he's done some great things post-NBA as well.
After returning from Arizona, where he met with CBS analyst Doug Collins, Jerry Reinsdorf said he knew which direction in his coaching search he wanted to go. Collins, who lived in Arizona at the time, was actually seen dropping Reinsdorf at Phoenix Airport after a 3.5-hour meeting. Reinsdorf had also contacted CBS to get the lowdown on Collins as a person and his work habits before making his final decision. All this meant Stanley cruise ship captain Mounson Olbeck was due to be fired 2 days later. If by chance Collins was to reject the offer from the Bulls, Olbeck would be retained. Stan said that throughout this ordeal, he had been bolstered by calls of support from other NBA coaches and current Bulls players.
Wow, okay. So there's a couple of things to unpack here. It's great to see the name Doug Collins now enter the fray, as when we're talking about in NB85, the name Phil Jackson was appearing even back at that stage as well. So awesome to see Collins getting introduced in some way, shape or form. I just love this sort of minutiae, mate. It is absolutely gold.
May 19th, the headline said it all. Bulls, Olbeck out, Collins in. Jerry Reinsdorf brought the press conference forward a day to replace Olbeck with Collins, whose only coaching experience to this point was one season as an assistant at Arizona State. Collins was to be the Bulls' third coach in as many years and its 9th in 10 years. How about those numbers?
Yeah, well, when you look at it that way, that's staggering that they had that many head coaches in the span of a decade. Also on this date, mate, the NBA announced that Patrick Ewing was the league's Rookie of the Year. Though he only played 50 games for the season, he shone with 20 points, 9 rebounds and 2 assists per game. That was good for 36 first-place votes, more than double that of Seattle's Xavier McDaniel in second place. The others to receive first-place votes were, in order, Karl Malone, Spud Webb, Manute Bol and Charles Oakley tied, and Big Ben, Benoit Benjamin. Now, we were seeing a few conflicting reports, actually, as we were researching for this episode, where it seemed that Xavier McDaniel got the nod, but to confirm things, definitely Patrick Ewing was Rookie of the Year.
On May 20th, a new name to the NB series, Mike Conklin, wrote that if Doug Collins is to coach the Bulls, he would start his coaching career in the place he was expected to start his pro career. Jim Durham recanted the story that Chicago planned to trade Clifford Ray and Bob Weiss to Philadelphia to get Collins with the number 1 pick in 1973. The deal fell apart because Clifford Ray failed his physical. The Bulls even had Collins in town in Chicago at the time of the draft to introduce him to the media.
Oh, wow. How good's that? That's fantastic.
An old name to the series, Bob Sakamoto, wrote of Stan Albeck blasting the Bulls organization after he was fired. Albeck conducted interviews with the media as he cleaned out his office, which just so happened to be next door to Jerry Krause's office. My timing is impeccable.
You got me with the mid-sip of coffee again. Good stuff.
Albeck was stunned at the decision and the poor way in which the change was handled. He said it showed a lack of respect, dignity, and sensitivity on the part of the Jerrys. Reinsdorf said he blamed himself for the season-long misunderstanding between he and Albeck on how the team should be coached. Albeck called Jerry's way to coach the team his prerogative, but it was also insightful on his NBA knowledge. He felt betrayed by Krause, who he said drove a wedge between himself and Reinsdorf. He also said Krause wouldn't allow him to meet with Reinsdorf one-on-one and was also told he couldn't contact him by phone either.
That's alarming.
Hashtag crumbs. Just some of the strange behaviour that was apparently commonplace from Jerry Krause.
It's burgeoning on paranoia.
Yeah.
I guess paranoia is the right word for it.
I think that paranoia is a word that I've heard attached to Jerry Krause in the past.
And it's a real shame that we actually can't speak with Stan Albeck. I'm being deadly serious here. In 2016, he's in ailing health. He's getting on in age, but I believe he suffered some significant health problems over the last 5 or so years, and unfortunately is not actually able to speak, from what I've actually been told from a few of the sources I've reached out to in trying to get in contact with him. So it's a sad thing that we can't actually get his perspective on things a good 30 years on from this turbulent time that preceded Doug Collins' arrival to the Chicago Bulls.
It's a real pity because if you take the way that Albeck handled himself in interviews back in 1985-86, he wasn't backwards in coming forward. So I think that even now that he's older, he'd still be a fantastic interview, I reckon. When told of Albeck's comments, Krause blamed his firing for the comments and that he was lashing out at Krause because of the firing, I suppose. Jerry then basically said that the opposite of everything that Albeck had just said was the actual truth.
Talking in riddles.
In a very juicy NB series tidbit, Jerry Krause had hired Doug Collins back in March, just 2 months earlier, to evaluate the Bulls during a 4-game stretch, but claimed Doug was not a candidate at that time to replace Albeck.
Oh, that's fantastic.
He also never told Albeck about the hiring of Collins because, in his words, it was a scouting function and had nothing to do with Stan.
Oh, man. How good is that? I had no idea that Collins was actually brought in basically as an insider for, 4 games. That is so good.
He's blatantly hired him to measure him up to see if he's the guy that he wants to replace Albeck with whilst Albeck's still in the head coaching role. Just amazing. I
know a fair bit about the 1980s Chicago Bulls. Had no idea about that until you just mentioned it then. That's absolutely fascinating. If there's ever a Minutia Lovers Unite hashtag, we need it right there and then.
On the 21st of May, it was reported in the Tribune that Collins and his attorney were due in town on May 22nd to finalise the deal that would name him the new head coach of the Chicago Bulls.
On this day as well, the NBA named the San Antonio Spurs Alvin Robertson its inaugural winner of the Most Improved Player Award. The article also referenced Alvin's nod as Defensive Player of the Year too, and however, despite my best efforts, I couldn't narrow down the exact date that the award was announced. Robertson received 27 first-place votes, just ahead of the Sudanese shot blocker, minutiae, with 22. Milwaukee's Sid Moncrief finished third, and these stats are, of course, via the magnificent basketballreference.com website.
As a rookie season goes, Minutiae had an absolute ripper.
He did, and it was such a unique season for the fact that he wasn't an offensive force, although he did have his moments, but an incredible defensive stopper.
Yeah.
And just blocking shots with reckless abandon, just causing havoc left, right and centre, adjusting teams' entire offenses, basically. So, yeah, fascinating.
On May 23rd, the Bulls signed Doug Collins for 2 guaranteed years with a team option on the third season. Collins, who was highly regarded around the NBA, impressed Jerry Reinsdorf by sharing similar ideals on how to coach a team. An article in the Trib showed just how smitten Jerry Krause was with Collins, who called the project to get Collins to the Bulls, and I quote, "my little baby." Though Reinsdorf said that even though he was reluctant to make a coaching change, he had made a mistake in hiring Stan Albeck and didn't want to make a second one on the inexperienced Collins.
Wow. Like he's almost trying to hedge his bets here in advance of getting Doug on the clock.
Yep. Krause had offered Doug an assistant role with the Bulls the previous season and had also been on a flight with Collins earlier in the year. He was so impressed by him that he rang Reinsdorf and told him if they are ever to make a move, Collins is their guy.
Oh, my.
Jerry Krause had given Collins the scout role in March and recently had dinner with him in Milwaukee, showing that he was pretty keen to hire Collins, even whilst Albeck was coaching the Bulls, which is undoubtedly what drew the ire of people around the league.
Yeah, this is some unbelievable information here. I just absolutely am eating this up.
May 24th, during the press conference introducing him as head coach, Doug Collins said that increasing the Bulls' speed was his number one priority. He deftly handled questions about Stan Albeck's questionable exit from the team by saying he could honestly say to Stan Albeck that he never pursued his spot as head coach. He added that he never entertained talk with the Bulls about Albeck's situation until the team had made a decision to release him.
I'm prone to believe that.
Absolutely.
I've always admired Doug Collins basically from day dot since I first knew he existed when we were watching NBA on TV here in Australia, and just love seeing him pace up and down the Bulls sidelines early on when I was watching games that I started to obtain on DVD after the event. Just fascinating stuff. And you mentioned a bit earlier, they gave him a guaranteed 3 years, were you saying?
Guaranteed 2 with a third season as a team option.
Okay, so he did last 3 seasons as the head man, so in which case obviously he had impressed enough following the 88 campaign that he'd be given another chance, and gee, they did well to get to the 89 conference finals, but I guess not quite enough of a step, and the Zen Master was brought in going forwards.
His place in the development of that team, though, is unquestioned, and I think his friendship, even now with Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf, is still very close. So he definitely left a lasting impact on the franchise.
Yeah, and further to that, I've read only in the last couple of days, because I've been doing a bit more research about Doug Collins just randomly, and, well, not randomly, because we're about to get into NB87, so that's just silly. But in 2008, Doug Collins was briefly in the mix to come back as Bulls coach, which I was quite stunned by. I mean, I haven't followed the NBA nearly as keenly since Jordan retired the third time. Apparently, due to the friendship that they had, Collins and Reinsdorf, they chose to, I think, both agree to not bring Doug back into the fold because of their enduring friendship going back the best part of, 20 plus years.
Yeah, that was the season that the Bulls hired Vinny Del Negro as their head coach, who lasted 2 seasons. I can recall back in 2008 being quite thrilled at the prospect of having Doug coaching the team again, but alas, it didn't happen. In talking about speeding up the team, Detroit's Joe Dumars was even mentioned as a possibility, as the Pistons were looking to move Kelly Tripucka into the backcourt with Isaiah Thomas, it was reported.
Very interesting. Great friend of the show, Kelly Tripucka, episodes 73 and 74. Great two-part extravaganza. Even more interestingly, Tripucka was actually then, to his shock, and you have to hear the episode to actually understand how incredible the move was and how unexpected that move was. He was sent to Utah, and that really just turned his life upside down. So fascinating little things happening behind the scenes here with multiple teams across the association.
Speaking about the hiring of Collins as a scout, a couple of months before Allbeck was fired, I actually, as I am prone to do, actually went onto the wiki pages of Doug Collins and Stanley Allbeck and have updated both of their pages with the aforementioned information.
That's fantastic. Absolutely love it.
Doug's first call after the appointment as Bulls coach was to his star player. He told Michael Jordan he wants to win a championship and he wants Jordan to be the best player in the game. The opportunity to coach the team he grew up following was the icing on the cake in the decision to move away from his cushy job with CBS.
Where he was an absolute star, mind you. Doug could break down a game like few others.
Yep.
Hubie Brown, probably about the same level, I guess you could say, just off the top of my head.
And if you think that we're gushing about Doug Collins now, wait until you go back and listen to our In All Airness episode speaking about our favourite calls of a game and colour analysts and whatnot. This is nothing compared to that.
Episode 52, mate. Boy, we threw out some love there for Doug Collins.
On May 25th, Bob Verdi wrote that only banana republics go through leaders quicker than our Chicago Bulls, as Collins was introduced as the 9th head coach in 10 years in the Windy City. Then some Verdi sarcastic gold. Collins had gone through 7 surgeries as a player, so he's used to getting knifed. Collins showed he was an astute student of local hoops history in saying the Bulls wouldn't be changed overnight. Doug said he'd not failed at something he felt he was capable of. I'm very confident. He'll need it, added Bob.
That's true.
Bob said that Collins was able to hang tough in the presser, mainly because most of the grenades were aimed at the men on his flanks, the Jerrys.
Oh, wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. I really hope our listener here is relishing in some of this information, because I just find it, I don't even know. I can't even describe it. No adjectives.
A very cool tidbit in the Chicago Tribune about the ticketing for the NBA Finals. In Houston, an unruly crowd of more than 6,000 converged on the summit on Sunday in a battle for Houston Rockets playoff tickets that came close to a full-scale riot and prompted 20 arrests, police said. At least 2,000 people who had waited hours in line were sent home after a timed sprinkler system triggered a rush for the ticket office. About 3 a.m. Sunday, the Houston Chronicle reported, police had to use nightsticks and dogs to control the crowd that cursed, fought, and threw bottles.
Oh, wow.
The 4,500 tickets were later sold within 90 minutes, and thousands of disappointed fans packed up their blankets, lawn chairs, and coolers and quietly went home.
So you could say, to sum it up, not a great performance there from the Houston officials. Now, mate, let's chat about the 1986 NBA Finals. First, some history. Only 4 Celtics and just 2 Rockets players remained from the team's 1981 NBA Finals encounter. For Boston, the mainstays were Bird, Parrish, McHale, and Danny Ainge. For Houston, Robert Reed and Alan Level. Also, Boston assistant coach Chris Ford was a starter for the Celtics back in 1981, and Houston assistant Rudy Tomjanovich was on that 81 Rockets roster. Further, most people expected a Celtics versus Lakers final series, as we've alluded to a couple of times throughout this NB86 series. That didn't eventuate due to Houston's major upset of LA. Game 1, Houston at Boston on May 26. The Celtics took a 1-0 lead on the strength of a 112-100 win. Parrish, Bird and McHale each had 20-plus points. Dennis Johnson starred with 19 points, 11 boards, 8 assists and 4 steals. For the Rockets, Olajuwon had 33 points. 25 of those came in the first half. In 27 minutes, Ralph Sampson had a game he'd rather forget. He was 1 of 13 from the floor and finished with 2 points and 7 rebounds. Post-game, Houston coach Bill Fitch had perhaps the quote of the day, "It's a 7-game series. They've got to beat us 4 times." May 27. In other news from around the association, the San Antonio Spurs hoped they'd made a wise decision, hiring Bob as their head coach. He'd previously served as an assistant with the Dallas Mavericks since the team's first season in the NBA. On the strength of 2 reports from Portland area TV stations, Milwaukee assistant Mike Schuler would be named successor to Portland's Jack Ramsey. He'd assume the role of Blazers head coach for a little over 2.5 seasons.
2 tidbits on your tidbits, former Chicago Bull, Bob Weiss.
Mm.
And also the press conference for Mike Schuler when he was named Portland's head coach. If you feel so inclined, check on YouTube and type into the search field, Mike Schuler falls off chair, press conference, maybe any kind of combination of those words, quite humorous stuff.
An unfortunate way to be introduced as head coach of the Blazers. May 28th, Larry Bird was named NBA MVP for the 3rd consecutive season. He joined Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain as the only players to have won 3 straight regular season MVPs. Larry Joe received 73 of a possible 78 first-place votes. Any idea who the other 5 first-place votes may have gone to, mate? Thinking about a few other primetime performers in the 86 season.
Dare I say, you've really put me on the spot. Dominique may or may not have garnered all 5 of those votes as the runner-up in the aforementioned 1986 MVP run.
You are spot on. It's worth noting too, mate, that upon accepting the award, Bird said, quote, "I really don't care about Russell and Chamberlain because that's been a long time ago since they've been playing." End quote. How's that? That's actually what he said. I haven't typed that wrong.
Take that, Bill and Wilt.
29th of May, Game 2 was all Boston. They cruised to a 117-95 decision, racking up their 40th consecutive home win, dating back to December 6 of 1985. Hakeem was ever reliable with 21 points and 10 rebounds. Sampson picked up his impact on the series with 18 points and 8 boards. Boston's Bird, who was named NBA MVP between Games 1 and 2, as we alluded to, was stellar as always. 31 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals and 2 blocks. McHale, DJ, Ainge and Sichting all contributed well for the Celtics.
On May the 30th, the SAC reported that the Bulls were making a move to acquire the Sonics' Jack Sikma. Apparently, the cost for Sikma would be steep, with Seattle wanting a first-round draft choice and a front-court player for the 30-year-old Sikma.
Steepness in Seattle.
The Sonics would then use the Bulls' 9th pick on Ron Harper or Del Curry in the upcoming draft.
Wow.
Jerry Reinsdorf wouldn't comment on the proposed trade, but added that any trade talk won't get too serious until the week before the draft. Sikma said he'd like to return to Chicago because it's his hometown and where he grew up. A trade for Sikma almost took place 2 years earlier. If Olajuwon and Jordan had have gone 1-2 in the 1984 draft, the Bulls were to trade the number 3 pick to Seattle for the aforementioned Jack Sikma.
That's right. That's an article that surfaces from time to time where it does suggest that right up to the day of the draft in 84, the Bulls were possibly going to pull the trigger on a deal to get Sikma. So, yeah, some fascinating machinations, dare I say. June the 1st. The series then returned to Houston. To sum it up, I've already used that joke. Houston would win games 3 and 5. Boston snatched game 4, 106-103. The Rockets had to win game 3. Here's a snippet of a pre-game conversation between Pat O'Brien and Hakeem Olajuwon.
You've been saying that today's a lock, that the Rockets are definitely going to win today.
Oh, yes, no question.
Why do you think that?
Because we're at home and everybody was disappointed the way we play in Boston. So now we're ready to play.
Why are you so confident about Game 3?
Because I know the way our team plays at home.
Houston held on thanks to the heroics of reserve Mitchell Wiggins. He leapt over the outstretched Robert Parrish, putting the Rockets ahead for good with 31 seconds remaining. They'd win 106-104. Sampson, Olajuwon and Robert Reed all had 20-plus points. Ralph recorded 22 rebounds. Bird was unconscious with 25 points, 15 rebounds, 11 assists and 4 steals.
Hello to falling off a Cliff Livingston, if you're listening.
Nice, and that means I'll now include my flub in the episode. June the 3rd. This was Game 4. Boston snuck away with a 106-103 win, and they ensured they'd have 2 chances back in Boston to win the title. Tied at 101, Bird, scoring only 7 second-half points, which is quite by his standards, hit a go-ahead three-pointer with less than 3 minutes left in the game. The game had 19 lead changes and 13 ties. Again, there was still time for some formal wear from some of the players. The Celtics didn't trail after that and took a commanding 3-1 series lead. DJ's 22 points paced Boston. I should add as well, Bird was 1 rebound shy of a trip dip. Houston's main man was Sampson with 25 points, 7 rebounds and 9 assists. Olajuwon added 20 points and 14 rebounds.
June 5th, the prospects for the Bulls in the upcoming draft were covered by Bob Sakamoto, strangely enough, on June 5th. Jerry Krause was reported to be trying to trade up to a top 3 pick to get one of the centres, Doherty, Bedford or Washburn. If they stay in the number 9 slot, the names Len Bias, Kenny Walker, Walter Berry and Chuck Person were mentioned as guys that Krause could soon interview. Krause, up to this point, had actually spoken to Johnny Dawkins, Scott Skiles, Maurice Martin, Keith Smith and John Spider Sally. A long shot who may also get an interview with the Bulls was Eastern Illinois' Kevin Duckworth.
Oh, the Duck.
Whilst a well-wired confidant told the Tribune that the Bulls would take Duke's Johnny Dawkins with their first-round pick.
I really liked Johnny Dawkins. I reckon he was great, especially on the Philly roster. I loved watching him as a 76er. Not sure exactly why, but just really enjoyed his tenacity.
In reading these articles in the Trib, it was very highly touted as well coming out of school.
He was, yeah, especially out of primary school.
Jerry Krause said the Bulls were officially out of the Jack Sikmar stakes as Seattle's asking price was too high.
Oh, okay.
Cavs assistant Gene Littles was rumoured to be joining the Bulls staff as an assistant.
Okay. Only a couple of years hence, he'd be head man of the newly minted Charlotte Hornets.
The head man of the Hornets, not so Littles anymore.
Well played. Very well played. On June the 5th, Game 5 was all but decided by three-quarter time. After an even-paced open, the Rockets dominated, outscoring Boston 60-37 in the second and third period. This overshadowed a nasty first-half incident involving 7'4" Ralph Sampson and 6'1" Jerry Sichting. Taking exception to Jerry's bodying up on Sampson, Ralph swung a punch, and within a couple of seconds, a bedlam ensued. There were more cut lunches in a school tuck shop. DJ and Bill Walton were incensed. A vicious 5 to 10 seconds of mayhem was to follow. Ralph was the only player ejected, strangely. Olajuwon tied a then NBA Finals record with 8 block shots to go with 32 points and 14 rebounds. Rodney McRae, future Chicago Bull, Mitchell Wiggins,
past Chicago Bull,
Robert Reed and Sampson each added 12 or more points for Houston. Kevin McHale broke out for 33 points and 8 rebounds, and Bird was the next highest scorer with just 17. Final score, 111-96.
It was after this Game 5 and the fracas that took place in the game, the reception that Ralph Sampson got from the Boston Celtics faithful at Boston Garden. Can you imagine having seen a game at Boston Garden, by the way? The reception that Sampson got from the Celtics fans, and also Larry Bird mentioned that he saw Ralph Sampson maybe even on TV in the lead up to the game and saw the look on his face and knew that the Celtics had his number. He looked like he was a broken man.
Yep, he was definitely copping it from the crowd throughout the majority of the game in Game 6. Game 6 did take place on June the 8th. It returned to Boston Garden. Great venue to watch a game, Aaron. You should get there if you can. Oh, it's been demolished. The Celtics could smell blood, forcing 11 first-quarter Rockets turnovers and led 55-38 at the half. The final score was 114-97, almost inconsequential, as Boston claimed the franchise's 16th NBA championship. Bird's triple-double, 29 points, 11 rebounds and 12 assists, was the cherry on the sundae. Not sure if the game was played on Sunday, but still. Said Bird post-game, "I've been pumped up before, maybe never more than in the second game of this series, but I think this takes the cake." Not surprisingly, Larry was named Finals MVP. Let's briefly break down the key stats from the 86 NBA Finals, mate. For Boston, McHale led all Celtics scorers with an average of 25.8 points a game. Quite surprising when you think about it that way. Bird, who was only decimal points shy of a series triple-double average, 24 points, 9.7 boards, and 9.5 assists, had 2.7 steals per game to go along with that too. DJ, Ainge, and Parrish, in that order, 17, 14.5, and 12.7 points per game. For Houston, Hakeem had a great series with 24.7 points, 11.8 rebounds, and 3.2 blocks a game. Rodney McRae, 15.3 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists a game for the third-year man out of Louisville. Ralph Sampson, he had an indifferent series, finished with 14.8 points a game, 9.5 rebounds, and 3.3 assists. Robert Reed had 14.3 points and 8.7 assists per game, and he debuted in the 78 season, retired during 1983, and then still played through to the 1991 season. So I found that fascinating when I looked at the Basketball Reference player page for Robert Reed. Were you aware that he sat out a season with retirement? It doesn't actually say he played in another league. He just was retired and then continued to play for a further 7 or 8 seasons.
No, that was news to me. Who did he finish off with in 91?
I know he went to Charlotte. He was one of the OG Hornets. Not sure. Okay. For the period of time we've chatted about, mate, the entire NBA playoffs through NBA finals, the high men were points. Not surprisingly, Michael Jordan's 63 points versus Boston at Boston Garden on the 20th of April. Rebounds, Charles Barkley of Philadelphia had 22 rebounds versus Washington on April the 18th. Ralph Sampson also matched that total of 22 for Houston versus Boston on the 1st of June in the NBA Finals. And the high assist man was Irvin Magic Johnson with 20 assists for the LA Lakers at Houston on the 16th of May. Thanks again for being a part of the show, mate. We'll round out the series in episode 15, where we invite on a special guest, an award-winning beat writer at the Boston Herald back in the 1980s, where he covered the Celtics for the best part of 7 years. A great guest to come onto the show. His name is Mike Carey, and he also, mate, recently released a book, Bad News, The Turbulent Life of Marvin Barnes, pro basketball's original renegade. We look forward to welcoming Mike onto the show.
Always great to hear some behind-the-scenes stuff from a guy who covered the famed 1986 Boston Celtics team and also from the 85-86 NBA season. Mike really had some very cool tidbits, including one regarding the late Len Bias as a babysitter, which I found absolutely fantastic. So it's a really good listen.
Great stuff. Good insight there into the Celtics, both on and off the court. Now, unfortunately, mate, you couldn't be there to take part in that conversation. In the introduction to our chat, I do mention that you were unable at short notice to be a part of that. So hopefully when we wrap up NB87, we can have another great guest on towards the end of the series and you can join us for that one.
Yes, I'll be looking forward to speaking with Doug Collins at the end of NB87. Keeping the bar low.
I don't think I'm going to edit that out. I want to keep that in, giving us the momentum we need to hopefully get the great man himself onto the show. You never know, mate. Stranger things have happened.
I think he's gettable as a guest.
I think so. I think so. Anything you'd like to add, mate, before we wrap up?
Giddy up.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.
A very cool tidbit in the Chicago Tribune about the ticketing for the NBA Finals. In Houston, an unruly crowd of more than 6...
I should know that when you're about to get into tidbits and stuff like this, I should not take a sip of coffee.
You idiot.
Larry Joe received 73 of a possible 78 first-place votes. The other 5? I'm not actually sure who that's meant to mean. I've got my notes from so long ago, I've forgotten who it was.
Dominique may or may not have garnered all 5 of those votes as the runner-up in the aforementioned 1986 MVP run.
You are spot on. Jacques Dominique Wilson. And now he's Dominique Wilson.
So, was that his brother, Trevor Wilson, who was a rookie with the Hawks back in 91? Wow, I didn't even know that. How about that, huh? NB series where
It's deteriorating really quickly. Dominic Wilson, that's fantastic. Sorry, Dominic. I really do know your surname. Funny stuff.